another object lesson here. What I'd like to consider here is what causes us to fall into the pit. What are the stresses and the losses in our lives? Now, I have brought something here, and some of you I know recognize this. This is a pressure cooker. Now, if you've ever used one of these, you know it has several parts. It has a heavy pot. This one plugs in, but the old-fashioned ones sat on the stove. This thing is pretty heavy. And it has grooves here. It has a very special lid that also has grooves. And it has a seal. I don't know if I can get that loose, but it's a rubber gasket. This lid locks in place. And it has a little tiny escape valve. And it has a little weight that sits on top of this little tiny escape valve. And when it's on there and the pressure's up, it goes and the pressure causes things inside to cook and boil. And the old-fashioned ones could actually blow up. Now, that was if you left them on too long and didn't watch them carefully. Now, I want you to imagine that your body, your beingness, is a pressure cooker. This is your mind, your emotions, your physical body, and your spirit. All of this is like a pressure cooker. Now, we didn't really realize this, that we are constantly putting our stresses and our losses into this pot. They just keep building up, one on top of the other. The problem is, we don't know how to let them out. So, I wanted to talk briefly about what are some of the losses in our lives. And I'd like for you now to kind of keep track on your fingers. When I name some of these things, which are the ones that you have personally experienced? And even children as young as 5 and 6 years old are beginning to experience some of these pressures or losses. Frequently we think of grief in relation to a death, but many of the losses do not necessarily have to be a death. Okay, are you ready to start counting on your fingers? The loss of a grandmother or a grandfather. Maybe they moved away and you don't get to see them very much. That can be a loss. The loss of friends. Maybe you're going to a new school this year and you're going to miss your old friends. The breakup of a family through divorce. That is a huge loss into the pressure cooker. The loss of a sister or brother. Maybe your brother goes off to college. Maybe they die. Maybe it's a miscarriage, the loss of a dearly wanted baby. Maybe it's the loss of your home or your belongings. Sometimes those things happen through a fire or through other ways too. Sometimes it's the loss of your ability to think straight, or the loss of memory, or the loss of about mobility, being able to move. Maybe you break your leg and you can't play that sport this season. And you're very sad about it. Again, those things can cause us to dim our light. Maybe you have the loss of a parent. Again, maybe through divorce, maybe through death. Maybe it's the loss of sports, that you have an injury and you can't play your sport anymore. Maybe it's the loss of your pet, the one you've had for so long that's always there for you, your dog or your cat, or even a goldfish. Perhaps it is the loss of a child, or a job that you love, or a job that you hoped you would get. Into the pot, all building up. The heat is on. Perhaps your husband or wife has died, and you miss them terribly. And we just don't know what to do with all this loss. Maybe the worst loss of all is the loss of myself. When I get so buried in all of this that I can't see my way out. Some of the other stresses that we have are money, and even children can have money worries, car repairs, doctor appointments, orthodontal appointments, problems within the family, people not getting along, stress building up. Perhaps there are addictions, or job problems, or worrying about the kids. Kids, please know we worry about them a lot. Or school problems, or being bullied at school. All of these things, one person said to me, "This is so depressing. Why are we doing this?" The reason we're doing this is to learn, and this is what I'm hoping to give you right now, is how to release some of the pressures and the losses, so that we can actually take the lid off the pressure cooker and come to a place of peace. Now, we're not ever taught how to do this. We're taught, don't cry. There are lots of songs out there too, like Big Girls Don't Cry, or how about this one that I just had brought to consciousness this year? You better watch out, you better not cry. It's kind of a subliminal message we have that crying is not a good thing. And do you know what? Crying releases some of the pressure. Scientists have actually analyzed tears, and tears of sadness are different than tears of joy or tears of happiness. And we think all of our tears are tears of sadness, and when in reality they're not. And frequently when we lose a person, many of those tears are tears of love. Simply because we love them and we miss them. We're human and we miss them. Another very interesting thing, when we cry, our body literally goes up and down like this. It shakes. And do you know what? When you laugh, your body does the exact same motion. Both crying and laughing are ways of releasing. And both of them are healing. So the thought of not crying is really not a healthy place to be. So I give each of you permission to cry, even if you need to do it all in your room in the dark. One of the other things that happen when we have losses in our life, particularly if it's a person, is we feel crazy. That is a normal part of grief. We feel confused. I just can't think straight. I can't make decisions because a huge amount of my energy is involved in the grieving process. Again, all of this piling up inside this pressure cooker. I want you to know that feeling crazy or feeling confused is normal. Just like when you're in the pit, we all have our times, and it's normal. Another part of grief and stress is panic attacks. Have you ever had a panic attack? Or known someone who has? Raise your hand if you've ever had one or known someone. Quite a few hands up. Now what happens there is there's a part of your brain that goes off. It's what I call the fire alarm. It's the amygdala. It is the fight, flight, or freeze part of your brain. And what it does is signals the body to breathe faster, and the heart to beat faster, and the brain to race. And it's a scary feeling. Sometimes people think they're dying or having a heart attack. So what can you do? Is there anything you can do? I'd like to share with you a couple of tools that can help you to literally calm a panic attack. If you have medications that you've been given by a doctor, of course use those medications. But most of us have not been given medications. So, your heart is a hotbed of electrical activity. Each one of you have healing energy in your hands. When you touch another person in a loving way, that energy goes out to them. When you place that same hand, rub your hands together for a moment. Rub. Are we back on? There we are. Rub those hands together and feel the heat. Now place one of your hands on your heart. Your heart is a little bit on the left-hand side, which would be this side. Now place your other hand over that heart, over that other hand. When you do this, it begins to calm your heart. If you have a child that is crying or throwing a tantrum, and they will let you, place your hand on their heart. You can place one on their heart and one on their back, and they will calm down much more quickly. But for yourself, if you're in a car or prior to a big meeting or whatever it is, place your hand on your heart. And the other one is to place the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Remember I said your brain waves are racing when you're having a panic attack? When you place your tongue on the roof of your mouth, it's not way back, it's not right behind your teeth, it's kind of gently straight up. Can you find that spot? It helps to slow those brain waves down into a normal range. Those are two things you can do for yourself without anyone else around to help calm yourself. Okay, the other thing that is really important is how to deal with anger. And as a rule, we are not taught how to deal with anger. We're told to count to 10. Or we tell ourselves, I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't be mad, but guess what? I am. So when I tell myself that, I am invalidating myself, which really doesn't work. So in the grief classes that I work with, we talk about a lot of constructive ways to release anger. And this is wonderful for kids too. So, exercise of all kinds is a wonderful way to get that energy out. Hitting things, throwing things, kicking things. Can you think of any sports that have to do with hitting, kicking, or throwing? Tennis? One guy said, just keep hitting that ball up against the wall. Some places have a wall where you can just keep hitting. Whack, whack, whack. I'm so mad at my friend. Dad won't listen to me. Whack, whack, whack. Kick that ball.
Boxing.
Say it again.
Boxing.
Boxing. There are punching bags. Well, I don't have a punching bag. Is there anything at your house you could punch? Pillows. How about your bed? One boy had one of those plastic bats and he would just beat it. He would beat that bed to let out the anger. And his anger was justified. His father had taken his own life and he was so sad. He was 10 years old. Dad, I miss you. I need you. Someone suggested throwing rocks in a river. Usually by a river there are lots of rocks. Someone said you could write words on the rocks. Throw them into the river. And they sink. You get that physical motion of the throwing, the watching it, the sound of it splashing and then sinking, and then rolling down the river and being healed. I've had 6 women tell me that they have broken glass. Wham! And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. That is so dangerous. But there is something that you can throw or smash that won't make a mess and won't be dangerous. And that is ice. If you take ice and slam it on the pavement, and I have done this with a lot of people, if that ice cube doesn't break up properly, we each have a hammer too. Whack, whack. This is for when you said that. This is when you didn't listen to me. This is when you left me. Whack, whack, whack. It lets out a huge amount of anger. The pressure releasing out of the pot. I highly recommend it. Everyone has access to ice. There are other ways, cycling, running, walking, jump rope, batting cages, baseball. We said tennis. How about whacking golf balls? Martial arts. There's one of those punching things. Ooh, this is a good one for boys. Boys, are you listening back there? Get a piece of wood and just hammer a bunch of nails into it. This motion of hitting, and if you're thinking about letting that anger go rather than putting it in, we're letting it out. chopping wood. Some people have more mild ways of doing it, like writing in a journal, or meditation, or yoga. One of them that we haven't said is yelling. Do you think yelling lets out anger? It does. Now, do we yell at people? Don't yell at people. But is it okay to go outside in the backyard and just scream? I hope that's okay with your parents. Sometimes people tell me they yell in their cars when they're in traffic. Another one is drumming. There are ways to let the pressure out of the pressure cooker. Because you see, if we don't do it, then it just keeps building up until we blow. And we don't understand why we just blew. When you were counting on your finger some of those losses, raise your hand if you had at least 3. Okay? Raise your hand if you had 6 or more. Even the kids. Are you surprised? Everything building up? These are some tools you can use, but you have a team of people in this church who are also here to help you. And part of their job is to take care of you. But we're all part of it because we're all taking care of each other. And when we share our joy, it multiplies. And when we share our sorrow, it is divided. Do all the good you can, in all the ways you can, for all the people you can, forever, as long as you can. If someone needs some help, lend a hand. If your friend is sad, give a hug. When you are kind to the people in your life, others will be kind to you. May we all realize that sometimes we're the one pulling out of the pit, and sometimes we are the one in the pit. But at least we have each other. Thank you for looking inside your heart. May we always be there for each other. Amen and blessed be.